Okay, so we are going to do our reading for the Birchbark House. It's shorter today what I'm going to read. I'm just going to finish the chapter that we were on, and I'm picking up where we left off on Thursday, yesterday. Nokomis was getting ready to tell her story, and I'm going to read the story to you today. So, here we go. It says, Grandma's Story, Fishing the Dark Side of the Lake. When I was just a little girl, said Nokomis, her voice lilting high and dropping low, her voice far away, I was told by my grandfather who I lived with, who raised me, never to fish the dark side of the lake. Why, you wonder? I never knew that either. Never found out until, of course, being a young girl and very curious, I took my grandfather's canoe out one day while he was sleeping. I put my fishing spear and nets in the canoe. I would fish where the water was deepest, strangest, bluest on clear days, and blackest on cloudy days. That's where I paddled. I had a stick and a line. I let that down, baited, and I waited to see what sort of fish I would catch. The wait was long, my grandchildren, and as I fished there I grew uneasy. I remembered my grandfather's warnings, the way he insisted that I was never to approach this deep water. I'd seen him looking out there, sometimes at sunset, his eyes sad and clear. Sometimes he mentioned my grandmother. She'd gone away young, I knew that, but not much more. Her favorite food, he said, was fresh plums. She could stand beneath a plum tree and eat all day, he said. When he said that, he smiled. Fresh, wild plums. I'd taken dark red plums with me. As I sat in the boat waiting for the fish to bite, I put them slowly one by one into my mouth. What was wrong with this side of the lake, I had to wonder. Except for the depth and the darkness, it wasn't much different. I'd find out what was different, I decided. I kept my line in the water. My bait must have been wrong, though. My bait must have been no good. I didn't get a bite, even a little nibble. Maybe, I thought, Grandfather told me not to fish this dark side of the lake because no fish lived here. That'd be a joke on me. Just then I looked over the side of the boat and I spilled all the rest of my plums into the water. I was disgusted. Down they went to the bottom. Not long after they sank from sight, though, I had a strong tug on my line. Then, not just a tug, a real pull. Soon I was struggling to keep from being dragged overboard. I'd caught something huge. Suddenly a hand reached out of the water, pulled itself up my fishing line, finger over finger, fist over fist, until suddenly the beautiful face of a woman appeared. She looked up at me and kept climbing. Do you have more plums? She asked. I said no, but I helped her into the boat anyway. Her hair was black and endlessly long, covering her, and underneath it she wore a simple plain dress. Her smile was gentle, her skin was purple, gray, cold, the colors of those plums. There was something familiar about her, something awful and familiar. I was very much afraid and began to paddle quickly back to Grandfather. Still, I was a curious child. Who are you? I asked as we traveled along. I'm your grandmother, she said. Here's what happened. Long ago I married your grandfather. We could not be parted. We were like one person, he and I. He was stingy with me. After I bore our first child and lay her in his arms, after she grew for a year, I became my daring self again. I became again the wild girl he'd loved from the beginning. One night I dared him to swim with me in the deepest part of the lake. We went out in our canoe until we reached the darkest and the coldest side, where you have found me. I dived in deep as I could, pulled my way down, down, until I reached the bottom. My dear grandchild, that's when I got lost. It was so dark at the bottom that I got turned around. I couldn't find my way back up again, and so tired, I curled up in the cold weeds and I went to sleep, until now. My grandmother looked towards the shore. Her face glowed in the twilight. I saw as we approached that she was watching my grandfather as he came down the path from the camp to the edge of the lake. He walked closer and closer. Something strange happened. I rubbed my eyes. I passed my hand across my face. I could not believe what I was seeing. As he approached, my grandfather's steps seemed to pick up life. His hair got darker and darker until it turned the pure black of his youth. Lines disappeared from his face. He straightened his bowed back. Just as our canoe touched the shore, he smiled. And oh, my grandchildren, suddenly he had all his teeth. I got out of the canoe. He looked upon me kindly, said goodbye to me, and then he took my place in the canoe with his young wife. The two gazed into each other's faces with great happiness. I watched the two paddle away together into the darkness, into the night. 2 shooting stars passed over the sky. The lake was silent. I never saw my grandfather again. But eventually, mementos of him, a necklace he was wearing, washed up on the dark side of the lake. When Nokomis finished, no word was spoken. Olmachias could say nothing because stiff hairs prickled at the back of her neck. She couldn't get the sight of that hand reaching out of the water from her mind. Tin and Angeline were wiping tears from their eyes. Mama sighed and continued her work, slowly and carefully, on Angeline's shawl. Perhaps she was thinking of the big gathering, where Angeline might meet someone and go away with him, far from her mother's gaze. Although she didn't want that to happen, it was inevitable, and Yellow Kettle's fond look said all that was in her heart. How deeply she loved her children, how dear they were to her, the center of her life. Being naturally cheerful and bold, though, she soon grinned and joked. Yellow Kettle could not help turning the mood her way, and soon everyone was laughing over Newo's tumbling and Andeg's playful squawks as Newo followed him, grabbing for him. Andeg knew just how to stay out of reach of those chubby, curious fingers. Okay, so with that, we've made it to chapter 10 in the Birchbark House. So this is where we will pick up, not next week, but the week after when we start back with social studies. So we're almost done. We don't have too much left. So go ahead, click the next button, and get started on your Nearpod. Bye, guys.